Good to have you with us on this Tuesday. We begin this hour with that report by Special Counsel John Durham looking into the FBI's probe, which looked into potential ties between Russia and former President Trump's 2016 presidential campaign. The report accused the FBI of acting negligently by opening the investigation based on insufficient and vague information, but it did not produce any blockbuster revelations of criminal conduct. NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delaney joins us now with more on this. Ken, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. In this 306-page report, Special Counsel John Durham excoriates the FBI for what he says is being too credulous with accepting information that some of which came from politically tainted sources, including that infamous Steele dossier, and also just not thoroughly vetting some of the information that it used to open this counterintelligence investigation that blossomed into the Trump-Russia investigation conducted by Special Counsel Robert Mueller. But as you said, this report did not live up to what former President Trump said that it would. He called it the crime of the century. He expected that people were going to go to jail over this. Really, only 2 criminal cases were brought by this special counsel, and both resulted in acquittals by juries. And no major allegations of corruption, conspiracy, or even acting with political bias were brought by the special counsel against the FBI. Everyone acknowledges the FBI made mistakes in this investigation. That was the conclusion of a 2019 Inspector General report. The FBI saying it made a lot of changes since then, and that some of these missteps could not happen today, Joe.
You put together a report on this. Let's take a look at that package right now.
This morning, the investigation that followed a political firestorm around the 2016 election.
A horrible, horrible, disgusting witch hunt.
Finally wrapping up ahead of the next one. Republicans saying it exposed serious wrongdoing by the FBI.
The FBI has an awful lot of work to do.
While Democrats calling it a rehash that didn't live up to its billing.
The investigation, the investigators by Durham revealed little to nothing.
Mr. Trump on his Truth Social website saying the American public was scammed. But the report, though highly critical of the FBI, did not back up Mr. Trump's claims that he was framed by a corrupt deep state conspiracy.
I think it's a political crime of the century.
In fact, Special Counsel John Durham did not find corruption or even actions motivated by politics. Durham was tapped by Trump's Attorney General, Bill Barr, to look into whether FBI officials abused their powers when they opened an investigation in 2016, codenamed Crossfire Hurricane, looking into allegations the Trump campaign had colluded with the Russian government. That eventually led to the appointment of Special Counsel Robert Mueller, who in the end did not find a conspiracy between Trump and the Kremlin.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing.
Although Mueller did find a Trump campaign eager to accept help from Russians. Durham's report criticized what he called seriously deficient mistakes by the FBI, adding the Bureau was much more cautious and skeptical about allegations against the Clinton campaign. All potential fodder for Trump as he mounts another campaign for president.
And, Joe, the FBI said in a statement that they've made a number of changes to the way they approach national security investigations that would prevent some of these missteps from happening again. And there's also a new rule that says the Attorney General has to approve any investigation into a national political campaign. Joe.
All right, Ken Delaney. And Ken, thank you so much. Turning now to that violent baseball bat attack in Virginia. A man wielding a metal bat assaulted 2 staffers at the office of Congressman Jerry Connolly. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles joins us from Fairfax, Virginia with the latest on this. Ryan, good morning.
Joe, good morning to you. And we do have good news. Those 2 staffers who were injured in the attack yesterday have both been released from the hospital. Their boss, Jerry Connolly, telling us that he believes that they will recover from their physical injuries. But what he is worried about is the trauma that they experienced in this office here behind me.
Someone has been struck with a bat.
This morning, police are trying to determine why a man entered Democratic Congressman Jerry Connolly's Virginia office and attacked 2 of his staffers with a metal baseball bat. The same man, police believe, is seen in this new surveillance footage, chasing another woman nearby just minutes earlier. Authorities say the suspect then showed up at Connolly's office, looking for the lawmaker. And when he learned the congressman wasn't there, he went off. hitting two of Connolly's staffers.
One of the staffers who was injured, she's an intern, and today was her first day.
The staffers treated and released at a local hospital.
You could absolutely tell that the people inside were scared. They were hiding.
Federal investigators searching the home of 49-year-old suspect, Juan Ka Tran Pham, who has a history of run-ins with police. In 2022, court documents show he was charged with assaulting and attempting to disarm an officer during what prosecutors described as a mental health crisis. The charges were later dropped when Pham complied with treatment. Pham also filed a $29 million handwritten lawsuit against the CIA last year, claiming he'd been wrongfully imprisoned and alleging he'd been, quote, brutally tortured from the fourth dimension. This latest assault comes as attacks against members of Congress and their families have skyrocketed. Just last month, Capitol Police Chief Tom Manger telling lawmakers the number of threats had increased 400% over the last 6 years.
I worry about the normalization of violence in our politics. I've got a strong and resilient staff. They're committed to their mission, and they're not going to be deterred by this kind of tragic incident.
And Congressman Connolly now says that he and his office will review security here in their district. He's already working with Capitol Police to try and find fixes for what happened here yesterday. He said that he's worried not only for the safety of his staff, but for the general public who enter into these doors every single day. Joe?
All right, Ryan, thank you so much. Now to the latest on the standoff over the debt ceiling in Washington. We are just weeks away from a potentially crippling debt default if no deal is reached on Capitol Hill. President Biden is expected to host a crucial meeting today at the White House with congressional leaders with the hopes of reaching an agreement. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen issued a new warning yesterday saying the U.S. could still default as soon as June 1st. NBC News senior congressional correspondent Garrett Haake joins us now with the latest in all this. Garrett, good morning to you. So just remind us, where do we stand on negotiations as we head into this critical meeting today?
Joe, I've never been less excited to get to June and the summer because right now it seems like they're still basically nowhere. Lawmakers and the president are hoping to get in a room today and decide on at least the parameters for negotiation that the White House says still isn't even a negotiation. Now, Kevin McCarthy, every time he spoke to reporters yesterday, seemed less and less optimistic about the state of things. I want to play for you some of what he told us yesterday and then give you the White House's view of things on the other side. Here's McCarthy.
The only body in all of Congress are the Republicans who raised the debt ceiling. And we did it way in advance before Janet Yellen told us when the deadline was, because we didn't want to be here. So no, I don't think we're in a good place. I know we're not.
Now, President Biden has been much more publicly optimistic about this, but the White House and the lawmakers close to the process have basically said these negotiations, discussions, whatever you want to call them, have begun to center around just a couple things, making permitting for things like energy and infrastructure projects a little bit easier, spending caps on future spending, and maybe trying to claw back some unspent pandemic money. That may be what this all comes down to at the end of the day, Joe.
So, Garrett, as we've reported, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen wrote another letter to Congress yesterday, basically reiterating the same point. The U.S. could default on its debt obligations in a couple weeks from Thursday. Remind us what's at stake here. And also, this really isn't a situation where they could reach a deal on May 31st and everything's hunky-dory, right?
No, that's right. I mean, it's going to take some time to pass into law whatever deal gets reached. So you got to almost back time this by a week or two to be sure that you don't accidentally stumble across that deadline. And this is different than a government shutdown. The effects here could be far more wide-ranging. First of all, you'd see delayed payments for things like Social Security checks, veterans benefits, your tax return money. If you haven't gotten it yet, don't expect it after June 1st if we're in default. You'd also see interest rate spikes. That could hurt you if you're trying to buy a car or build a house. And then your retirement savings would take a hit, as would, frankly, the rest of the markets. So we've never been in this situation before, Joe. There's almost like a bias against even thinking about how bad it could be. But that's the reality, according to economists across the political spectrum.
And Garrett, NBC News has learned Vice President Kamala Harris is going to be part of today's meeting at the White House. That's according to a source familiar with her plans. What should we know about her role today? Does that tell us anything about this process right now?
Well, it's interesting because one of the things we've heard from the Republicans involved in this process is they'd like to see the negotiating group get smaller, not bigger. They think that would be helpful in coming to an actual deal. But what our White House folks are saying, what the sources they're talking to are saying, is that the vice president's getting involved in part so she could be a more active participant in the messaging around this issue, kind of laying out the risks, the necessity of reaching some kind of deal, of raising the debt ceiling, particularly while the president's out of the country, which is a trip that's supposed to begin tomorrow, Joe, and nobody knows exactly whether he'll still go or for how long, to Japan and to Australia. If these negotiations that may or may not be negotiations heat up or get stuck, the president could be needed back here in the States to push this thing across the finish line, too.
Yeah, a lot of White House journalists are wondering if they're about to embark on a long overseas trip or if they're just going to stay in Washington.
It's a mileage run to nowhere, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Garrett, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Turning now to the war in Ukraine, Russia carried out another wave of airstrikes on Kyiv overnight, but Ukrainian officials say they shot down all the missiles and drones. This latest attack comes after President Zelensky wrapped up his European tour. Or as he wraps that tour up, NBC News foreign correspondent Molly Hunter joins us now from Kyiv. Molly, good morning.
Joe, good morning to you. And not just another wave, according to Ukrainian officials, the biggest attack on the capital in weeks, 18 missiles in all. And as you say this morning, the Ukrainian Air Force, they say their air defenses, which include an American-supplied Patriot defense system, shot down every single missile.
Overnight, a massive wave of Russian attacks aimed at Ukraine's capital, the biggest in weeks. Ukraine's Air Force says Russia targeted Kyiv with at least 18 missiles from the north, south, and east. And Ukraine's air defense systems shooting down even the most advanced Russian weapons, including 6 hypersonic Counsel missiles launched from aircraft, 9 cruise missiles launched from the Black Sea, 3 land-based missiles, and 9 drones, all destroyed, according to the Air Force. The defense minister calling it another unbelievable success for the Ukrainian Air Forces, adding, "Thank you to our Air Force service members and our partner states who invested in securing the skies over Ukraine and all of Europe." The overnight attack comes on the heels of fresh military investment from Western allies.
Повертаємось додому з новими оборонними пакетами. Більше нової, більше потужної зброї для фронту, більше захисту для наших людей, більше політичної підтримки.
President Zelensky speaking on his way home after his successful European tour. But Zelensky's priority remains fighter jets and increased support from the U.S.
Дякую, Британії, за домовленість. Ми продовжуємо працювати і над коаліцією винищувачів.
Down south, just off the front line, Ukraine is training troops as fast as they can. We expect the counteroffensive to start, and we are ready, this soldier says. Ready, another soldier adds, to finally end this war. These last 4 days in the bitterly contested town of Bakhmut, controlled largely by the Russian Wagner Group, have seen the first major battlefield gains for Ukraine in months. Momentum the Ukrainians hope that will drive their coming offensive.
Now, Joe, this morning and really for the last several days, the focus is still absolutely on Bakhmut, and the Ukrainians say they are turning the tide here. We are chasing an unverified video that has emerged where the Wagner Group chief, Yevgeny Prigozhin, claims that American soldier has died in Bakhmut. NBC News has not verified this claim, has not verified this video. We are chasing this. We have reached out to all U.S. officials to get more information on this, Joe.
All right. Molly Hunter reporting from Kyiv. Molly, thank you so much. Now to the U.S.-Mexico border, where the number of migrants crossing into this country has dropped dramatically in the days after the end of Title 42 restrictions. But processing centers are still over capacity, and they're struggling to accommodate people who have already made it into border cities. NBC News national correspondent Miguel Almaguer is in San Diego with the latest.
This morning, the Border Patrol continues to release thousands of migrants into the U.S. following the end of the public health order known as Title 42. Massive processing centers designed to hold 18,000 migrants are being pushed to their limits, according to DHS officials. One administration official telling NBC News those released most recently have been vetted, have court dates, and have passed credible fear screenings, the first step step in claiming asylum. But court documents show DHS released over 2,500 migrants without court dates just after Title 42 ended Friday. The numbers overwhelming shelters and cities alike. The Biden administration is touting that illegal crossings have fallen nearly in half since Title 42 expired, though that's compared to the record-breaking surges of last week. The administration says stricter punishments under Title 8, the section of U.S. law dealing with immigration that was in place before Title 42 and is now being enforced again, is slowing the flow. This teen from Guatemala says she was turned back and told to apply for asylum at a port of entry. But Republican Senator Lindsey Graham says the numbers don't tell the full story.
They've reduced the number of people waiting in line because they gave everybody in line a pass.
It comes as busloads and trainloads of migrants keep arriving in cities nationwide. In New York City, some asylum seekers are now being housed in school gymnasiums.
They didn't really tell the parents anything until the kids came home and said something later on in the day. That's when we got notified.
This morning, a humanitarian crisis being felt far beyond the southern border.
Our thanks to Miguel Almaguer for that report. Migrants who cross the border illegally now face a 5-year bar on returning to the U.S. and possible criminal charges. Time now for a check on your morning News Now weather. Meteorologist Angie Lassman joins us with the forecast. Angie, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. We've got a heat wave still going strong in parts of the Pacific Northwest. That's where we've had multiple 90-degree days for a lot of cities. Medford being one of those. We're going to end up at 90 degrees again today. Low 80s for Seattle. But still, these numbers are way above normal for where they should be for this time of year. It's going to last a little while longer. We'll have a bit of relief in some spots. Notice by Friday, Seattle gets back down to about 80 degrees, but hits the mid-80s for Wednesday and Thursday. Still going strong with the 90s, or at least close to 90 for Medford through the next couple of days. So we could continue to see these record-breaking highs in some spots. Meanwhile, in the Northeast and in the Midwest, we have kind of a mixed bag. We're going to be into the 80s for Chicago today. Cincinnati hit 68 degrees, 82 degrees for New York. So running a little above normal, but that doesn't last for long. We'll slowly but surely start to see these temperatures coming down. And by the time we get into tomorrow, we'll see temperatures into the 50s for parts of New England, 68 degrees in Philadelphia. Out towards Detroit and Chicago, we'll hang out into those low to mid 60s for our afternoon temperatures. But it's Thursday morning that'll really get your attention. It's not going to feel all that warm like it has for days and days. We're going to start to bring these temperatures down. And in some spots, we could be dealing with frost advisories. Not great for those plants, especially those early buds that we've already seen in the gardening that I'm sure you've done on these warmer afternoons. Cleveland will end up at 41 degrees in the morning hours, 42 for Bridgeport, 42 for Boston. So just prepare for that on Thursday morning with an extra layer. You'll need it. Now, the fire alerts are still up for some of these major cities. Boston, Newport, Providence, Hartford, all included in that because we've got some gusty winds up to 30 miles per hour, and we've also got the low humidity. So we will look for that to stick with us through the day today. Meanwhile, in the mid-Atlantic, we have the potential to see some strong storms. There's 10 million people included in this. The risk is mainly going to be those strong winds, so gusts up to 60 miles per hour, but we won't rule out the potential for some large hail as well as those tornadoes in this area. Places like Knoxville, Boone, London all have that better chance to see that. But again, Nashville included in that, Chattanooga as well. Looking at the radar, you can see some of the heavy rain that is going to work through that similar area that I just mentioned. That's where we have the potential for some flooding concerns. We've already seen an active early morning hour with some thunderstorms there, but the potential for some flooding rains is going to be there here through at least the next couple of days. Here's the flash flood risk for today, where you see that darker blue, better chance to see the flash flooding, and you'll notice why. We have localized amounts up to 3 inches when we have rainfall rates that are kind of impressive like that, and all that rain happening in a really short period of time. Flooding, of course, something that we'll have to watch for. Going across the southeast, though, over the next couple of days, this will be through Wednesday. What we'll have to deal with, notice there's a widespread area stretching from really Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, all the way into the southeast, including major cities like Atlanta, Asheville, Raleigh. We'll see those highest amounts, though, places like Kentucky. That's where we'll see those amounts upwards of 1, maybe 2 inches, up to 3 inches. So it'll be a couple of days where we'll have to watch for the flash flooding concern, Joe, as well as the severe storms and the temperature changes to come by Thursday for folks in the Northeast. We've got it all going on.
All right. Yeah, these high temps aren't sticking around forever, I guess. All right, Angie, thank you so much.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.